Ma'am, we need to see the financial records for this place. We received an anonymous tip about illegal transactions and tax inversion.
Do you have a warrant for that?
We don't need a warrant to ask for the paperwork. Just hand it over and this will be easy.
According to the Fourth Amendment, you absolutely do. No warrant, no search. You are not coming anywhere near my files.
Ma'am, step aside, otherwise...
On that fateful Wednesday afternoon, Officer Johnson led his team believing it was just another routine inspection. An anonymous tip, a few questions, a quick review of paperwork. Nothing out of the ordinary. In October 2024, a black woman who identified herself as Keisha Monroe was inside her office when 3 armed police officers entered the building, demanding access to her business records. Before we continue with what happened next, if you appreciate investigative breakdowns like this one, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now, back to what unfolded inside that office. The space was modest but professional. Keisha Monroe Consulting, the nameplate on the door read. Inside, a wooden desk held stacks of invoices and contracts. A desktop computer displayed open spreadsheets, evidence of a workday in progress. Filing cabinets lined the wall behind her. Motivational quotes in simple frames. A small potted plant on the windowsill. The kind of office built by someone who started small and worked their way up. Keisha Monroe stood near her desk when the officers entered. She wore a blue jean jacket over an orange sleeveless top and black leggings. Her hair was plaited neatly and pulled back from her face. She dropped a folder she was holding when they walked in. She didn't sit down. She didn't retreat. She stood there, facing them directly, with the calm composure of someone who had every right to be exactly where she was. Officer Johnson entered first, his uniform pressed, his expression neutral but firm. Behind him came 2 other officers. One held a Bodycam at chest level, the small red recording light glowing steadily. The other carried a tablet, its screen illuminated with what appeared to be notes or digital forms. All 3 wore their service weapons openly on their belts, the presence of which shifted the air in the room immediately. It wasn't the weapons themselves, it was what they represented. Authority, force, the implicit suggestion that non-compliance would carry consequences. "Ms. Monroe," Officer Johnson began, his tone measured and procedural. "We've received information regarding potentially illegal transactions being conducted through this business. We need to see your financial records, tax documents, business account statements, bank records." Keisha set the folder down on her desk slowly. She looked directly at Officer Johnson. "Do you have a warrant?" There was no panic in her voice, no hesitation, just a question. Simple, direct. Officer Johnson tilted his head slightly. "We don't need a warrant for this type of inspection. We're following up on an anonymous tip regarding tax inversion schemes and unreported income streams. You're required to cooperate with our investigation." Keisha crossed her arms, still standing. "I'm not required to do anything without a warrant. Fourth Amendment protects me from unreasonable searches and seizures. You need probable cause, and you need a warrant signed by a judge. Do you have one?" The officer with the tablet stepped forward, his boots heavy on the office floor. "Ma'am, if you have nothing to hide, this will go a lot smoother for everyone. We're just doing our jobs here. This doesn't have to be difficult." "And I'm just exercising my constitutional rights," Keisha replied, her voice still calm, still even. "You can come back with a warrant. I'll cooperate fully once you have the proper legal documentation." Officer Johnson's jaw tightened, a subtle shift in his expression. "Refusal to cooperate with a lawful investigation can be considered obstruction of justice. We have the authority to place you under arrest right now if you continue to refuse." Keisha didn't move. Obstruction? For what? For knowing my rights? For refusing an illegal search? The third officer, the one holding the body cam, began moving slowly toward the filing cabinets along the wall. His eyes scanned the office as he walked. "How exactly does someone in this neighborhood afford a setup like this?" he asked, his tone almost conversational, almost curious. "Nice desk, computer, all this paperwork. Just seems like a lot for around here." Keisha's eyes followed him sharply. "That's none of your concern, and you're not touching those files without a warrant." But his hand was already on the drawer handle. "Ma'am, step back from the desk," Officer Johnson said, his voice now harder, more commanding. "We're conducting this search based on reasonable suspicion of financial crimes. Your continued refusal is escalating this situation unnecessarily." "No warrant," Keisha repeated, standing her ground. "No search. This is illegal. You know it's illegal." Officer Johnson exchanged a glance with the officer holding the tablet. Then he nodded. The officer with the body cam pulled the filing cabinet drawer open. Papers shifted. Manila folders became visible. The officer with the tablet moved behind Keisha's desk, reaching for another drawer. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice," Officer Johnson announced, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Keisha raised both hands slowly, palms open and visible. "I am not resisting. I am not being violent. I am asserting my constitutional rights as a United States citizen. No warrant means no legal search. This is a violation. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." Her voice never rose, never wavered. She stood facing them as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The body cam captured every word, her posture, her calm, deliberate statements. The officers moving through her office, opening drawers, flipping through files, rifling through private business documents as if the law did not apply. "No warrant, no search," Keisha said again, now in handcuffs, still standing in her own office. "This is illegal." The body cam recorded it all. If encounters like this concern you, consider subscribing for more investigative body cam breakdowns that examine real-world authority, constitutional rights, and accountability. Keisha Monroe was taken to the county detention center. She was processed, fingerprinted, photographed, placed in a holding cell with other women who had been arrested that day. She asked repeatedly for her phone call. She asked for a lawyer. She asked what specific crime she was being charged with. The answer kept changing: obstruction, interfering with an investigation, failure to comply with lawful orders. But no one could explain what law she had broken by refusing a warrantless search of her private business records. 6 hours later, she was released. No charges filed, no arraignment, no bail hearing, just a release form and her personal belongings returned in a plastic bag. The officers who arrested her found nothing illegal in her office, no evidence of tax fraud, no unreported income, no criminal activity of any kind, because there was none. But the body cam footage remained, and in the hours and days that followed, that footage would travel far beyond the walls of that detention center. Keisha Monroe contacted a civil rights attorney the next morning, then another. By the end of the week, 3 separate law firms had reviewed the body cam recording. They watched the entire interaction frame by frame, the demand for financial records without a warrant, the threat of arrest for asserting constitutional rights, the comment about how someone in this neighborhood could afford her business, the forced entry into locked filing cabinets, the arrest of a non-violent woman inside her own legally operated office for refusing an illegal search. The attorneys didn't need to speculate. They didn't need to interpret tone or intent. It was all there. Recorded, time-stamped, narrated by the officers themselves. Within 2 weeks, a federal lawsuit was filed, not just against the police department, against Officer Johnson by name, against the officer with the tablet by name, against the officer who questioned how Keisha could afford her business by name. The lawsuit outlined multiple violations: Fourth Amendment violation for illegal search and seizure, abuse of authority under color of law, false arrest without probable cause, and racial profiling. The Fourth Amendment is not a suggestion. It is not a guideline subject to officer discretion. It is a constitutional protection that exists specifically to prevent exactly what happened in that office. The amendment states clearly that people have the right to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. It requires warrants to be issued only upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Officer Johnson had none of that. He had an anonymous tip, a badge, and the assumption that his authority was absolute. That assumption cost him his career. It cost the department $7 million, and it cost the public trust in a system that too often operates without accountability. The legal process moved faster than these cases typically do. The city's legal team reviewed the Bodycam footage. They consulted with their own constitutional experts. The conclusion was unavoidable. There was no legal defense, no technicality, no procedural justification. The officers had violated Keisha Monroe's Fourth Amendment rights on camera while wearing the uniforms and badges of a publicly funded police department. Settlement negotiations began within 3 months. Keisha's legal team made their position clear. This was not just about financial compensation. It was about acknowledgement, about setting a precedent, about sending a message that constitutional rights apply to everyone, regardless of neighborhood, race, or whether an officer finds someone's success suspicious. 8 months after that October afternoon, all 3 officers were dismissed from the department. Not resigned, not transferred to another precinct, not placed on administrative leave pending further review. Terminated. Officer Johnson, who led the team and demanded access without a warrant. The officer with the tablet, who suggested compliance would make things smoother. The officer with the body cam, who questioned how Keisha could afford her own business. Their personnel files were marked, their law enforcement careers effectively over, and the body cam footage that was supposed to protect them became the evidence that ended their employment. The department settled the lawsuit. $7 million awarded to Keisha Monroe. $7 million is not an arbitrary figure. It represents more than compensation for 6 hours of wrongful detention. It represents the value the court system places on constitutional rights. It represents the cost of violating those rights on camera while acting under the authority of a government agency. It represents what happens when the system, however slowly and imperfectly, is forced to hold itself accountable. But more than that, it represents deterrence. Every officer in that department now knows what it costs to ignore a citizen's Fourth Amendment rights. Every body cam recording is no longer just evidence of civilian behavior. It is potential evidence of officer misconduct. Every interaction is now a test of whether the officer understands that the law applies to them as much as it applies to the people they encounter. The settlement was announced publicly. The local news covered it. Legal analysts discussed it. Civil rights organizations cited it as an example of why body cam footage matters and why constitutional literacy matters and why accountability, even when delayed, still matters. Keisha Monroe returned to her office, the same modest space with the wooden desk and the filing cabinets and the motivational quotes on the wall. The same computer, still displaying spreadsheets. The same business she had built from the ground up without asking permission from anyone who doubted she belonged there. She stood in that office again, in the same spot where she had stood facing 3 armed officers months earlier. The furniture hadn't changed, the address hadn't changed, but something fundamental had shifted. The power dynamic that allowed those officers to walk into her space and demand compliance without legal authority had been recalibrated. Not by anger, not by protests in the street, though those have their place, not by viral outrage, though public attention played a role, but by the law itself, applied as it was written, enforced as it was intended. Keisha Monroe did not need to raise her voice to be heard. She did not need to become a symbol or a movement. She simply needed to know her rights and stand firm in asserting them, even when threatened with arrest, even when facing armed officers, even when the system initially failed to protect her. And when the footage was reviewed, when the lawyers examined the evidence, when the case went forward, The law did what it was designed to do. It protected the citizen from the government. It held power accountable. It affirmed that the Constitution is not a document reserved for certain neighborhoods or certain people or certain moments. It applies, always, to everyone. The Constitution did not change that day in October. What changed was who was forced to respect it. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe for more investigative narratives that examine power, accountability, and the moments caught on camera that change everything.